Hey there, good morning on a Saturday morning from an overcast day here in Southern Oregon. Things just come to me naturally in the morning, and so I know that I've covered some of this material in the past, but a couple things I want to make sure that I mention. But everybody knows what data processing is, right? A computer processes data, right? Okay, the old calculators, you're processing data. Okay, the old, like for instance, if you had a company or even a small business and you had to process paychecks. In the old days, a lot of times we did it manually with cards, right, to keep track of timesheets, how much money you put in. Not how much money, how much labor was put in. You know, you had to count a time card, right? Time is represented by units of energy, okay, electrons and magnetic light. Okay, so what holds the electrons in the light? That's information that's held within the light. Okay, so what we're doing here is that all the information is traveling through electrons, units of electrons, which are units of information, which is bits and bytes of data. So the electrons are carrying all the data. Okay, so all that data is held within the light, which represents what it is we're aware of. Okay, now if you look at planet Earth from a space cam, you'll see that what it is, it looks like a light bulb. All that light that is in there represents consciousness, units of consciousness. So everybody is a data processing unit, okay? So obviously when you go into a big building like I did one time, which was in Seal Beach, run by Rockwell International Corporation, which was known as the Information Sciences Division, which was attached next to the Satellite Systems Command, which was also attached to the Space Transportation Systems Command, which was the Space Shuttle project, which used to be the facility that did the Apollo program. I worked in that place for a couple of years. You learn quite a bit about how they do things. But the point that I'm trying to make here, and what really sort of clicked, was understanding that we're data processors. And the speed and the amount of information that we're processing is based on the spin of our Merkaba, which is based on the speed of the electrons that are running the information that we're aware of. So sometimes when people think that we're making judgments about others, what this really is that we're processing data at a higher rate of speed than others are. We're simply aware of more information because more information is held by what? More of the light. So the bigger your universe is based on what? How much light you're running. Or how much information is held within the light, which is captured by the amount and speed of the electrons. So this is why the 007 or 7 seconds of darkness means that we're running an imbalance between the black hole and the white hole, which means that we're running a deficit of electrons. So what does that mean? That means that more of the light is being drained into the dark, which essentially means that more light is being spun into a black hole, which is draining the light, which means they're draining data, which means we're not aware of more data. So when that means that more people are running on less data, as a result of running on a slower speed of the electrons, it means that you have people that are less aware of what others are aware of, because beings that are running a higher processor are simply aware of more of the electrons that are doing what? Transferring data, processing data. So one of the ways in which sometimes when I go to these different sports venues here, because so many of the guys that are in sports, because of the way that gematria works, because all these football games and basketball games are all rigged. Okay? It's sort of like being inside of a computer itself, which means your state of consciousness is in a mathematical field, numbers, because everything that travels that we become aware of in electrons and magnetic light, okay, means that we're inside a calculator, okay? But our consciousness is what's calculating all the numbers, okay? So the numbers can be quantified, which means the electrons can be quantified, because what's happening is the data is being processed mathematically as a numerical numbering system that is based on the electrons and the magnetic light that is experiencing itself. We are experiencing ourselves. We are experiencing all the data. Okay? So, for example, one of the ways in which I impart this knowledge, particularly to beings that sort of aren't aware of how this process works, is to sort of wake up the sports community, right, that are held captive to believing that these games are legitimate when they're not. Okay? It's all fake bullshit. It's a numbers game. It's wargaming. They wargame against each other. So what I do when I watch football games sometimes, particularly this guy Tom Brady, this guy's got a photographic memory. What he does is, memory? Remember I talked about the car, for example, where what's his name? Parker was an engineer who worked for the Ford Motor Company back in the 1860s, and he developed an automobile that ran on water. Okay? And then when the water ran out, the motor kept on running. How's that possible? Because the hydrogen atom was held in memory, so it knows the information that is represented by the units of electrons and magnetic light that is represented by the mass, the weight of the particle. In this case, you have hydrogen. So it remembered hydrogen. So it didn't need more hydrogen in order to remember hydrogen. So it was running on memory. Okay? So that's how it works. You're in a virtual reality simulator. Okay? A computer. Okay? So that's why I've mentioned a couple of times I run on a bigger motherboard, which is Gaia. Gaia is a bigger motherboard. So I know that I'm connected to a motherboard. Not a fatherboard, a motherboard. Okay? Guy's motherboard. I don't have a picture to put up there, but I've got a picture of her motherboard. Okay, so, crystals hold data, right? So in other words, you could take all the memory of humanity, of everything they've experienced for the last 1,000 years, and put it into a quartz crystal. You can do the same thing yourself. If you've ever cleared a crystal before, okay, and you want to put what I do with them. When I used to have a friend of mine, this girl who needed some help, she'd hand me some crystals and say, here, clear these and put some love in there. Well, that's simple enough to do. Okay, so now when she's wearing quartz crystals around, that thing's vibrating at, well, in this case, about 750, 800 megahertz. That is magnetic protection, right? That's highly magnetic. That's a lot of light powered by a lot of electrons that are in there, right? So that's pretty simple stuff. So what I commented on this morning was this guy was sort of saying that Aaron Rodgers, who's a great quarterback, had a virtuoso performance. So one of the comments that I put up there was, listen, Aaron Rodgers is like Tom Brady in the sense that he is able to map read, because that's what he's doing. He's reading the terra, which is the terrain. He's mapping numerically, quantifying numerically in the field all of the data that's being processed by the units of consciousness that represent the opponent. He's wargaming. Okay? So when he's very calm, cool, collected, and state of peace, he's running at a higher rate of speed. So he can process more data than they can. That means he's running a higher state of awareness than they are, and that means he can be one step ahead of them. And you can see that by how quickly he can execute data transfer. Because that's what it is. When he throws a football and somebody catches it, that can be numerically quantified with units of energy, which are units of electrons that are held within that light. Okay? That's how wargaming takes place on a football field. See, so this is one of the reasons why when you're in a state of peace, which is 600 million hertz, hell, you already know the result. So it's easy to be in what's called observer mode, which is really what it is, because you're able to process such an enormous amount of data that is occurring between all the data processors. And all the data processors are represented by all the people that are around here, like in this little town right here. When I look around and see people around here, they're all processing data that is in the field, okay, which is the electromagnetic spectrum, which are all the different frequencies, which represent all the different speeds of the electrons that are carrying information that are held within the light. So one of the advantages of having, if you will, higher states of consciousness, from which we come down to a lower dimension, is based on the density, the mass density, the weight of the particle. See? So that means that you come into a place in which things move at a slower rate of speed, because the amount of data that can be quantified as units of energy, as electrons and magnetic light, is moving at a slower rate of speed than we are. Okay, so it's man, I want to go home, which means you're always wanting to restore more of what you are, which is more than what the light is, which is holding more data. So you're processing more data. And the proof of that was, as I mentioned before, and the other guy that showed me a snapshot, he was able to take a picture of the pop-up. And it was exactly the same pop-up that I got from my cell phone. That was telling us that we were abusing the Android, which essentially means that it cannot, their supercomputer cannot process that much light or that much data that is held within that light. Okay? And that's the way it works when you're outside time, because that's infinite data, which is infinite information. Because the possibilities exist within all that light, which is what love is in living spirit, is impossible to quantify. It can't quantify that much data. Okay? So that's how you know the difference between what you are and what you're not. That's how you know the difference between whether you're a machine, okay, or whether you got a soul. Spirit. Okay? So you already know you're running at a higher rate of speed right out of the gate. So that's why as a child they think we're hyperactive. Man, these are Mexican jumping beans. My God, we got to slow these units down. They're processing too much data. We can't control something like that. That's precisely correct. And that's what it means. That's why when you're in a higher density state of consciousness, you're already free to be who you are. Because the amount of love that you have, that you're using, which is what the light is in living spirit, is processing eternity. You can't process that much data. Okay? That's like saying that you could process the amount of data that Source can process, which is everything that is held within the light. So imagine how many units of consciousness are aware of what it is they're experiencing at any one given moment of time that exists throughout the entire cosmos. You have any idea how much data that is? You think a supercomputer can compute that much data just like that? Your head would explode. It would explode. It would short circuit. It doesn't have that much energy. Because that's what we are. We're energy. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a measurement of energy. How much energy are you running on? Well, man, I love to run on the highest state of consciousness that is possible to experience. So that means you want to run on the most highest speed energy that's possible to experience. Because that's how it's measured. That's how we measure the speed of your learning. It's how fast are you learning, which means how fast are your electrons moving. The power of the light that you're experiencing, which is the spin of the Merkaba. So when your Merkaba is spinning in a spiral, if you've ever seen a cross-section of the heart, you realize the positive and the negative side of things, and you see all the little tiny spirals that are all around the heart. Okay? And so you begin to realize everything is moving as a spiral because all you have to do is take a top out on, like when we were children, right? Spin that thing. So what prevents a top from just careening and going off way out somewhere else in a random way that it just goes crashes into a wall or something like that? What holds it in place to be able to maintain its harmony? The balance between the two vortexes. That's how do you think these magnetic ships, these highly electromagnetic ships known as electrogravitics, don't bang into each other going at such high speeds? They're repelled by each other. Magnets are repelled by each other. So it's almost impossible. Nothing's impossible, but you get the picture. Okay? So these are units of electromagnetic energy that are moving through the cosmos at such a high rate of speed because they're a state of consciousness. Right? So you're in a virtual reality simulator. We're simulating. That's what it means to run at a slower speed. Instead of just manifesting in an immediate way what it is that just, hey, there's the picture. I'm in the picture. I'm in the movie. You're the projector. So you're projecting what it is you're manifesting using your conscious creative mind because the speed at which the electrons, the magnetic light, are producing what it is you thus experience is based on the sound and light that is creating it and manifesting it at the time in which you experience it. Which means your state of consciousness is not held captive by another unit of consciousness. It's impossible. You're running at too high a speed. And that is the genius of the cosmos, which means the faster that you're going, that your state of consciousness is aware of is what frees you from being held captive by another unit of consciousness. That's called graduation in the cosmos. That's why the lower dimensions are where the classrooms are, to learn how to do that, to free yourself. That's how we maintain the speed and the expansion of the universe, by going faster, which means we're experiencing higher speeds. And what's beautiful about that is when you're reaching the highest speed that you can attain, then you begin to realize wherever the light is in living spirit, I am, which means your consciousness, which means you're in the eternal light. That allows you to go wherever you want to go. Because the speed at which you're running means you're going to be bringing in high-speed light wherever you go. Thank you for bringing your energy in here. Because you're automatically restoring the light wherever you go that it needs to be restored as a result of slower speeds. So what happens if the universe or galaxy is slowing down in speed and it's losing too much of its light? So we can measure that over time in the lower dimensions. See? So now when you put the information in there and realize, hey, they changed the clock on us. Yeah, that means the electrons are always running in a deficit. They're running more dark energy than they are light energy, which is the light we see in front of us. So how can you see the light in front of us if you're running at a slower speed? That produces fear. I can't see my way around here. Man, what's ahead of me? Man, I'm in a state of fear. No, I can see the road ahead of me. I know what's going to happen 2 seconds from now, tomorrow, the next day, because I can see it in my looking glass. Now, when you begin to realize how fast you're moving through the cosmos, you begin to realize you can see everything that is in the light, which is what we are, which is what love is, which makes it impossible for us to live in fear. Because you know you're an eternal being, which is eternal life force energy. That's what it means to be in peace, love, harmony, and balance with living energies. Because it means you're in peace, love, and balance with your own energy. So that allows you to know that you're always in a state of peace. Because the energy that you're experiencing is beautiful to experience, and you've arrived. Okay? It means you learned how to be able to do that with your own soul and spirit. That's the purpose of a classroom. You know what I'm saying? So this was something I thought about this morning about this election, because we don't have political systems, okay, in higher dimensions, okay? They're totally unnecessary, because it's sort of like this. When I grew up as a child, you have a group of people over here, right, that say, hey, we're the state legislature. Everybody says, hey, we're going to put you in there because you seem like a good guy or a good gal and you're looking out for us. Well, it's sort of like my dad used to remind me when I was a child about a president called Calvin Coolidge. And he would tell me a little story about how some journalists would go over to the White House when he was taking a nap in the afternoon, and they were criticizing him about, you're supposed to be on the job here on behalf of the American people. And you know what his response was? I think the American people can manage their own lives without me, okay? Which means they don't need me in order to be able to manage their own lives. Are you kidding? They can take care of themselves. They're grown-ups, right? So when you think about that, you go, yeah, okay, because he's got his life to live, okay? He's got his own way in which he wants to express the journey that he's on, which is not going to be the same journey as us. So why do I want to have my state of consciousness being held captive by somebody else who's on their own journey? His journey is not going to be the same as ours. Okay, so to expect me to be a Xerox copy of what he's experiencing by him telling me that this is the way that I'm supposed to experience who I am isn't how the cosmos works. Otherwise, everybody's a robot. Robots are no fun. Life is more exciting when you realize how beautiful and the diversity in which everything comes in different forms, shapes, and colors that are expressing itself. That's the artist in the cosmos. That's the artist you realize you have within ourselves, which is what? Creative imagination. Which means you are the artist of your own story. End of story. So when you are operating at a high speed and your conscious creative imagination is manifesting what you're experiencing, when you're doing that, you begin to realize how empowered you actually are. Your consciousness is not held captive by something else that is slowing you down, slowing your speed down, which becomes artificial intelligence, because now we're using our intelligence instead of manifesting at a higher rate of speed the images of the sound and light that we're experiencing because it's moving so fast, okay, which means you are creating and manifesting what you're experiencing. That's different than the speed slowing down. Now I'm going to move over to the side of a mountain, jump on top of a bulldozer, pull the levers of the bulldozer. Then I'm going to start moving into a mountain, start moving the rocks away, see if I can find a vein of gold or silver or copper or iron ore. Then I got a steam shovel that's going to lift it up out of the ground, put it onto a truck. Then we're going to haul it to some place and put it on a conveyor belt, separate the wheat from the chaff. Then we're going to send it over to a foundry. Now we're going to heat it up, and then we're going to do what's called the metallurgical part of being able to extrude some aluminum or make it some carbon steel, or all the different grades in which metals can come in different shapes that have been molded. And then we send that off to another factory where a bunch of people are putting together through machine shops different parts that they can put together. Then they ship them out a door where somebody has a job. That's slow mode. Things move at a very slow rate of speed. That's the lower dimensional stuff. That's why it's a simulator. You're simulating. That's why it's at a slower rate of speed, so that's why we have memory here. Okay? So we're operating on memory. So now we're back into the program. So when you're running on a deficit, you begin to realize that we're running in reverse, because the information that went into the memory was designed to do what? Run at a deficit of electrons to power the light. That means we're running at a slower speed. When you're running at a higher speed, you're running off your conscious creative mind. Now you're manifesting. Welcome to the higher units of consciousness that are in the hyperdimensional realms, which are the heavenly realms. Because it means by virtue of the speed at which you're running, you automatically have a license to manifest. Because the cosmos is that intelligent to recognize that you are what that is, which means you are a reflection in the mirror of running at that higher speed. And because of that, you're manifesting at the speed at which you're experiencing who you are, which is what you're creating and manifesting at the time in which we do it. See? So that's why the amount of light that is in here right now, that is shifting, if you will, it means that there are more units of consciousness that are running at a higher speed than others are. These are the beings that are trying to drag the others along. And if they can't get their speed up, then the amount of energy, which means more units of consciousness are running at a higher rate of speed, will shift themselves, which means you want to be in alignment by doing the inner work to get your speed up, to increase the spin rotation of the Merkaba, so that you're in alignment with those that are in 5D to shift with the 5D that is shifting, which is why we know we're running out of time. Okay? We are at a point where as time goes forward, we're running out of time in which to get as many other units of consciousness up to the speed at which they can shift with the other units of consciousness that are here that are running 5D already. Okay? So this is where I began to realize and thought of this as a child, how many are going with us. So obviously we don't want to lose anybody, particularly when you sort the field of units of consciousness that were held captive by parasitic artificial intelligence that programmed into their memory to run on a deficit.